أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين بالقاسم محمد اللهم وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا أما بعد فقد قال أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب عليه الصلاة والسلام من كلام له في صفة من يتصدى للحكم بين الأمة وليس لذلك بأهل فيها أبغض الخلائق إلى صنفان الصنف الأول صلوات الله محمد وآل محمد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Inshallah, we're starting khutbah number 17 from Nahj al-Balaghah. This khutbah, like the last one, is divided into three parts. Inshallah, tonight, or rather today, I will discuss this first portion of it. And then, inshallah, in the consecutive weeks, we will finish off this sermon number 17. It could be divided into three parts. First two parts basically talk about the traits and the attributes of some of those people. And then the third part is where Imam is sort of uttering the words of shikayat and complaint to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we'll get to, inshallah, what Imam says. If you look at this khutbah sermon at a glance, things that are discussed in it is right there. And this basically highlights the entirety of the khutbah, the attributes of those who assume judicial or leadership roles without merit and qualification. So these are the people who are not qualified enough, but yet they are sitting comfortably in the position of that role, leading people astray. The Imam divides these people, these individuals, into two categories. First is the group that consists of those who knowingly follow the path of misguidance, indulge in desires, introduce innovations and into religion, and cause their own and others' deviation. Second group includes ignorant individuals posing as scholars, pseudo-scholars if you want to call them, who without any competence assume judicial authority. Right? Now, of course, they weave false arguments into people, especially those who do not possess the proper knowledge, repeatedly commit errors, mix truth with falsehood, and end up spilling innocent blood in the way as well, and unjustly transfer people's wealth. All that could be highlighted if you look in the context of this khutbah in the time of Imam Ali, what was happening in his surroundings and what was happening prior to him assuming the role of leadership. So the first group likely refers to the oppressive rulers who introduce wrongful innovations, while the second points out to those ignorant judges. The term hukm, or as I recited hakam, I don't know, either way, in this sermon broadly covers both the governance as well as the judicial. So it's not just the khalifa, but also the qazi, because at that time you had two different roles. You had qazi and then you had the khalifa. So Imam's usage of this word hukm or hakam relates to both of them. And as I said at the end of the sermon, Imam ﷺ complains to Allah about these individuals who have turned away from Quran, viewing good as evil and evil as good. So again, this sermon is divided into these three parts. This is khutbah at a glance. There's some keywords that will come in handy as we go through this khutbah. Imam in the very beginning uses this sentence, وَكَلَّهُ اللَّهُ إِلَى نَفْسِهِ. This is a terminology which is, again, Imam is inspired by the ayat of Quran. He says, God left him to himself. Ja'irun an qasd as-sabil. Qasd as-sabil is again an ayat of Quran, used in ayat of Quran, meaning a straight path. Ja'ir is someone who is away from the straight path. Mashghoof comes from the word shaghafa, one who loves something intensely to the level of passion, if you want to call it. Kalamul bid'ah. Bid'ah, we all know what bid'ah is. Innovations in religion, It's called bid'ah. Rahnun bi khatiyatihi, held by his own sins. Again, the word rahn is in Quran. Kullu nafsin bima kasabat rahina, right? Every soul gets what they have acquired. They are marhoon minnat to their own. In other words, amal. हम और आप अपने amal के marhoon minnat, and we say that. Rahina comes from the same, because it's basically you'll be held by your own sins. Yatasaddi, he engages in or addresses directly. Hada, we know the right path, the proper way. All right, here we get right into this first khutbah. Imam alayhi salatu wasalam begins by talking about and dividing people into two groups. He said, في صفة من يتصدى للحكم بين الأمة وليس لذلك بأهل. About those who sit for dispensation of justice among people, but are not fit for it. And then Imam says, أبغض الخلائق إلى الله sinfan. The worst, mabghuz tareen of the people in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are two types of people. So Imam does not count the kuffar or mushrikeen or Ahl al-Kitab who turned away from the religion of Islam. Does not count those munafiqeen even. Rather, Imam counts the mabghuz tareen to be those who know all these things. Yet, there is another attribute, this is another trait which they are following. What is it? He says, as-sinful awwal, inna abghaz al-khalaiq ila Allah rajulan. Among all the people, the most detested before Allah are two people. One who is devoted to himself only. So, of course, when it comes to love and hatred, in the case of Allah, and when it comes to love and hate in case of human being, they're two separate things. Our love and hate is based on our relationships, based on our human emotions, right? Emotionally attached with someone, of course, you'll be emotionally attached with your own family, your own child, your own parents, your spouse, your siblings. You're emotionally attached to them. So naturally, what will there be? There'll be love. And of course, hatred also. Same family members, if they do something which emotionally hurts you, you will have ikhtilaf, and even it might lead to hatred sometimes, unfortunately. So these feelings arise from psychological states influenced by attraction or aversion. However, in the context of Allah, God loves because, or the love of God signifies His rahmat toward His people, and the hatred of God signifies His removing rahmat from the people. That's how you understand the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not how you and I love each other. Rather, the love of Allah could be by granting mercy, while hatred could be withholding mercy and distancing His grace from them. So we understand the difference of love between humans and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then Imam offers a vivid description of the first group. He said, what do I mean by this first group? This is the one who devotes his nafs to himself only, and he does not care for others in his surrounding. He, for himself, is first and then everyone else. And he's going to sacrifice and throw everyone else under the bus for his own sake. So far, you might say, well, don't we all do that? Don't we all, in a sense, are going to prioritize ourselves over others? Of course, we're going to prioritize ourselves over others. But the moment it gets to the point of justice and injustice, as Quran keeps on telling us as well, that if you, those who had migrated, that be just, i'dilu, even if it goes against your own family members, i'dilu, right? Do not be deceived that, oh, this is my brother, this is my sister, this is my son. Remember the story of Hazrat Nuh? He said, Innahu min ahli, inna wa'dak al-haq. He's my son, and your promise is sacha, righteous. Oh Allah, you made a promise, and this is my ahl. The response came, Innahu laysa min ahlik. Innahu amalun ghayru salih. He's not your ahl. His amal is ghayru salih. And all that happens. So Imam then says, right from the very beginning, Rajulun wakalahu Allahu ila nafsihi, a person whom God leaves to himself. This person loves himself so much, Allah leaves him. Wakalahu Allahu. Wakala comes from tawkil, vikalat. We have wakile this, wakile that. So he does the vikalat of himself. This person is self-representing. All creation, including humans, is intrinsically dependent on God. So there's this concept of tawakkul that comes about. What is this notion telling you? The person who is left to himself doing his own wakalat, meaning this person is not doing tawakkul on other than himself, and that is most importantly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is the concept being created? This person thinks that he is, self-sufficient, and that leads to arrogance at the end. So if this connection that we have, and this needs to be understood, I won't dive too much into it, it's morning time and our minds are not open enough to get into philosophical discussions. But philosopher and Urafa discuss this, that we have this connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If this connection is severed, everything would perish. They give this connection, they give the example of this connection is sort of like the lights that are on over here. So the lights that we have here in this room, there's a source where they're coming from, right? So the power grid, wherever this power grid is, that's where they're channeling out the power to the entire city. And so it comes to our masjid, it goes to your house, it goes to the people, neighbors in this whole neighborhood. Everybody's getting some of this electricity. But where is it emerging from, that powerhouse? Can I plug this light right into the powerhouse? No, it'll blow up. It doesn't have the capacity to take it directly from it. So that's why they have means of channeling out to a voltage that is, appropriate for these sockets over here. I guess people in Pakistan would understand it better because of the load shedding and all that stuff, and 220 and 110. So we over here use 110. So the power that is coming in is 110 over here. You can't plug it directly into over there. So that's when you get this connection, we are dependent on that power grid. If the source is disconnected, what happens here? We have no power. Unless, of course, we put on our generators separately. We have no power. We'll be left without power. So we're constantly connected to the source and the power grid. Philosophers say the same thing. They say you and I are connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the same way. If this connection severs, what happens to us? We cease to exist. We would perish. So recognizing this dependence cultivates what? A spirit of tawakkul. You understand this connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you'll start relying upon Him and you'll get to the level of tawakkul. While one must strive with effort, they must also realize that the source of all goodness and blessing lies with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pure essence. But when a person, out of ignorance, as this person, وَكَلَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَى نَفْسِهِ فَهُوَ جَائِرٌ عَنْ قَصْدِ السَّبِيلِ, when this person becomes arrogant, selfishness comes about, indulges into desires, becomes oblivious to the truth, and imagines himself to be independent, right? This independence comes about, hurriyat comes about, they become disconnected from Allah. As a result, their perception becomes distorted, leading them astray. This severance from God is precisely what it means by left to oneself. Imam, when he says, this person is left to his own self, which is the root of all misfortunes and deviations. So for this reason, Prophet of Islam, Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, despite being the most exalted of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he would make this dua, Allahumma la takilni ila nafsi tarfata aynin abadan. O Allah, do not leave me to my own self, even for a blink of an eye. Meaning what? I want to be constantly connected with you. Don't leave me by myself for a blink of an eye. As mentioned in the prayers of Masumin as well, innaka in vakaltani ila nafsi tuqarribuni min ash-sharri wa tuba'iduni min al-khair. If you leave me to myself, I will be drawn closer to evil and distance from good. So nobody wants to be left to themselves. Imagine, right here. We have, however, 20 people sitting over here. If we all gather and we make a pact that we're gonna, or you all make a pact that you're gonna leave Maulana alone. You're gonna go on your own. You're gonna do all your things by yourself, and you're gonna neglect me, start neglecting me, and start leaving me to myself. I'll get a clear message that I must have done something wrong. That's why these people are going away from me. How would that feel? And I'm sure we have felt that once or twice in our lives, or even more, once in our lives, that people are not coming close to me, and they have sort of left me alone by myself. That is the worst feeling. That's the worst feeling. Children experience that a lot with their parents. When they do something wrong, especially when they're young, mother says, I'm not going to talk to you. What is that concept of I'm not going to talk to you says to this young child, this 5-year-old, 6-year-old, that he will not get scared of anything else, but mother not speaking to him right away threatens him that I've done something really bad. And that's what Allah says in the Quran as well. That La yukallimuhu Allahu yawm al-qiyamah. Allah will not speak to these people on the day of judgment. Someone say, well, who cares? I don't want to speak to Allah either. No, you would care. You just don't understand the value of it. So following this, Imam explains the root cause of such people, misfortunes, and elaborates on the harmful consequences. He identifies 8 detrimental outcomes. I'll go through these 8 in, inshallah, next 8 to 9 minutes, which are interconnected as causes and effects. First consequence, Imam says, فَهُوَ جَائِرٌ عَنْ قَصْدِ السَّبِيلِ مَشْغُوفٌ بِكَلَامٍ بِدْعَةٍ. That he strays from the path of righteousness. Qasd sabil, again, is the ayat of Quran. It refers to the straight, balanced, and the moderate path, free from extremes or of excess and deficiency. It is the path that leads people toward Allah. As Quran says, وَعَلَى اللَّهِ قَصْدُ السَّبِيلِ. And upon Allah, Surah Nahl, ayat number 9, and upon Allah rests the responsibility of the right path. Meaning Allah will give you that right path. But of course, this indicates either that if it is God who guides us to the right path, or the right path eventually connects us to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Either way, it is evident that a person can only discern the straight path is thinner than a hair and sharper than a sword. Right? Pul sirat baal se bhi zyada patla hai, thin hai, aur talwar se bhi zyada sharp hai. So, from countless misleading paths, if divine assistance is granted, you'll be on this path, inshallah. However, one who has severed connection with Allah, they are left to their own misfortunes. The second harmful thing that Imam mentions is mashghufun bi kalamin bid'atin. That a natural outcome of staying away is what? Such a person becomes deeply attached to his own heretical words. Mashghuf, as we mentioned before, comes from the word shaghafa. Shaghafa is from shaghaf, which means or refers to the thin membrane or covering that encases the heart. So that, I don't know, in the medical terminology, sometimes symbolizing a deep attachment or obsession. So that thin membrane that is covering or encasing the heart, that is deeply connected to it. The word shaghaf is used for that in Arabic. In Quran, this term is used to describe Zulaykha's intense love for Hazrat Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam. As the women of Misr, Egypt, they express this by this phrase of Quran, قَدْ شَغَفَهَا حُبًّا, that she is passionately in love with him. Here in the discussed passage, it signifies that such self-centered individuals have a strong emotional attachment to their heretical ideas. Their heretical ideas, of course, they're not good to begin with, and they are the reasons for innovations as well, often leading them to misguidedly call others towards misguidance. So not only they themselves are misguided, they call others towards it as well. As Quran says, وَمَا دُعَاءُ الْكَافِرِينَ إِلَّا فِي ضَلَالٍ. Imam also says over here, وَالدُّعَاءِ ضَلَالَةٍ. This bid'ah leads to what? Inviting others towards the path of the path of dalal, or the wrong path. In the fourth attribute, which is essentially a consequence, right here, Imam says, فَهُوَ فِتْنَةٌ لِمَنِ افْتَتَنَ بِهِ. He therefore becomes bothersome to those who are infatuated with him. So of course he has following. People are infatuated with him. This essentially is a consequence of it. These individuals, due to their being naive or being misled by the appearance, grow attached to him, considering him as a leader, entrusting him as a guide. Naturally, someone who is deeply invested in heresies and actively calls others towards misguidance inevitably becomes a cause of deviation for many followers. In the fifth, ظَالٌ عَنْ هُدَى ظَالٌ عَنْ هَدِيِ مَنْ كَانَ قَبْلَهُ. In the next description of these individuals, Imam says he himself is strayed from the guidance of those before him and leads others to stray to follow him as well. So there's a two-way problem with this person. At one point he's misguided, at second point he's doing what? He's assumed the leadership role. Now he's leading others to misguidance as well, and that is bad. Man kana qablahu, those before him, refers to prophets and the rightful successors, indicating the path of guidance has long been clear. It's not something ambiguous. Path of Hazrat Nuh, the path of Hazrat Ibrahim, the path of Hazrat Isa, the path of Hazrat Musa, and eventually the path of Khatamul Anbiya, Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So most tragically, such people not only lead others astray during their lives, but continue to do so even after their death. It's like, how's that happen? So there's this bid'ate hasana, as some have created. Rasulullah said, regarding the influence that people have as far as misguidance is concerned, he said, Man sanna sunnatan hasanatan umila biha min ba'dihi kana lahu ajru mithlu ujurihim. Whoever initiates a good practice that others follow, he will earn the reward of it. That those who follow without reward diminishing for them. So if someone left a good practice, we continue to follow it, guess what? That person is also getting the sawab for it. But on the contrary, conversely, Rasulullah said, whoever initiates a harmful practice, hasanat, bid'atun sayya'a, and others adopt it, he will bear the sin and that of those who follow without their sins being reduced. So I can give you many examples in the history of good and bad bid'at that had been introduced. Couple more, inshallah, we'll conclude. So his expression serves as a significant warning to those who initiate harmful innovations and establish path of misguidance. This misfortune is, of course, not limited to themselves in their lifetime, but is also carried over to thousands of people and the thousands of years after their demise. So thousands of years have passed of many that were there in the time of Rasulullah. Their innovations are still plaguing the Muslim Ummah. In sermon number 164 of Nahj al-Balaghah, Imam gives a powerful admonition. He says, وَإِنَّ شَرَّ النَّاسِ إِنَّ اللَّهِ إِمَامٌ جَائِرٌ ظَلَّ وَظُلَّ بِهِ فَأَمَاتَ سُنَّةٌ مَأْخُوذَةٌ وَهِيَ. Inshallah, when we get to sermon 164, Imam said, the worst people before Allah are unjust leaders. So this is basically reiteration of what Imam said over here in that sermon as well. So this expression highlights the severe accountability faced by these people. The seventh and the eighth description are the last two. Hammalun khataya ghayre wa rahnun bi khatiyate. Then who are these people? Imam says, such a person bears the burden of the sins of those he has left astray or led astray and remains bound by his own sins. So this is not merely a devotional expression. Ta'abbudi nahi hai ye baat. This is not, derived from, 2 rakat namaz of Fajr. It's ta'abbudi that you have to pray 2 rakat namaz of Fajr. This is a completely logical statement. Assisting or encouraging sin makes one a partner in it. Since followers willingly choose this misguided path, none of their sins are lessened, meaning both the leader and the followers are fully accountable for their actions. Some people started endorsing, some Muslims, you just heard the other day, started endorsing one of the running mates of the presidential race this year, right? Some of the Muslims from Michigan. And God knows what their thoughts are behind it, that they're going for that individual, but nonetheless. Quran clearly conveys this meaning in Surah Nahl, لِيَحْمِلُوا أَوْزَارَهُم. So Imam used the word حَمَّالٌ خَطَايَا غَيْرِهِ, that they are carrying the sins of others. Allah says in Quran, so they will bear the burdens in full on the day of resurrection. Not partially. Oh, they did it. No, you are responsible for their sins. The word rahan, which is used over here in the last, in relation to one's own sins, is a fascinating metaphor drawn from the Quran. The verse which I recited for you, kullu nafsin bima kasabat rahina. Every soul is held in pledge for what it has earned. Surah Muddassir, ayat number 38. Suggests that just as pledged items remains bound until the debt is paid. Right? So you come to a fundraiser, which by the way is coming up, and you pledge something. Now we're going to keep calling you. Where's your pledge? Where's your pledge? You're going to remain bound to this pledge until you have paid it off. That's what rahan means. Rahan, I'm sure many of you understand the rahan that is given usually when you're buying a property in other parts of the world. A person is spiritually bound by their sins until they make amends. Same way, when you make a pledge and you don't pay, you are bound to it. Same way, when you make sins or when you do sins, you commit sins, you're bound to these sins unless you amend them and you seek forgiveness. So from this it becomes clear that a path a person follows and the grim and the painful fate they encounter when God leaves them to themselves. May Allah give us the tawfiq to understand the kalam of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam. Allah.